Hey everybody, it's Chuck Marone with Strong Towns. There's an article today out in Vox. I'm not a big Vox reader, but a couple of you sent it to me, and so I'm going to respond to it. It's about reckless driving, and there's a study out. Vox loves their studies. There's a study out that suggests that Americans' reckless driving is up from the pandemic. Of course, we've talked about this many times, but particularly cell phone use. Americans are using their cell phones all the time to distract themselves while they're driving. This is leading to crashes. Crashes are up in this country. This reckless driving phenomena is part of it. And again, I don't think this is incorrect, like wholly incorrect. Yes, Americans are using their cell phones. Yes, they're distracted while they're driving. Yes, this is a problem. But I want to point out a couple things that I'm in downtown San Antonio right now, trying to figure out where I'm going. I want to point out a couple things. The article had a point that it made that this is not happening in Europe. And it talked about how, Europeans obviously have phones. Europeans obviously drive. But Europeans are not doing this. They're not reckless like we are. And the intimation of the whole thing was that, European culture is just different than American culture. We have somehow defective people. We have somehow a more broken culture. And in Europe, they're not doing the things that we do. And I'm going to say, this is where I think we start to go down this crazy route, right? Is reckless driving a problem? Yes. Is distracted driving a problem? Yes. Are people working on their cell phones a problem? Yes. Are humans dramatically different in the United States than they are in Europe? And I'm going to tell you, there's different cultures in Europe, I agree, but this is not a culture thing. This is not an American thing. Americans are not like uniquely defective or uniquely broken or have some unique problem that makes them, I'll use the word broken again when it comes to driving. They just don't. I remember being in a bus headed to Amalfi, and this is in Italy, and the road to Amalfi is very curvy and all that, and the bus would come right up to the side sometimes, and it was a little like death-defying as we're doing this. And I was there with my family and all that, and when we got off the bus, we're like, oh my gosh, we barely survived that. That was crazy. And then my daughter said, yeah, you don't know the half of it. The bus driver was scrolling Facebook the entire time he was driving. If you go to Europe, you're going to see people on their phones, right? You're going to see people driving on their phones. In fact, I'm going to say, I'm going to argue, I see maybe more of it in some European places. If we're trying to look for a difference between US and Europe, if we're trying to say US has distracted driving and we have worse outcomes than Europe, I actually think that we're doing a huge stretch when we say it's culture, right? I think we're doing like a huge disservice when it comes to culture. Here's the obvious difference. European roads are designed differently than ours. When you go into a city in Europe, it is not designed for speed the way that all of our city streets are. When you go into Europe, you have this transition that's much more defined between urban space and rural space, between roads and streets. And because of that, you have speeds that are more appropriate, more conditioned, more scaled to the types of complexity that you have. In the US, we could be not, less distracted than Europeans are, and more people are going to die on our streets because our streets are just designed to be very dangerous. I think we have to have in mind, or not fall seductively into this trap of, oh, Americans bad, Europeans good, because what it does is it's a distraction. It makes us seem like, well, if we just got really tough on cell phones, if we just got really tough on distracted driving, if we just did another Zero Vision campaign where we were trying to educate distracted drivers with billboards and newspaper ads and all this, we're dancing around the problem. The problem is that we've designed things to be very dangerous. And quite frankly, when you use forgiving design, when you design a road to be bigger than it needs to be, when you give drivers a lot of room to move, you give them a false sense of security. And you know what they do? They reach for their phone because the brain has extra mental capacity. We understand this in almost every other realm. For some reason, when it comes to driving, we are just so eager to blame the behavior of drivers instead of looking at the behavior of drivers and recognizing how it is a reflection of the environments we build. Thanks, everybody.